Hello, Stardust. I'm Crystel. Welcome to my universe. Today, I'll be sharing with you the process of creating 3 watercolor portraits. The first 2 I made more than 2 years ago, while the last one is recent. I just discovered the videos of the first 2 portraits in my archives and noticed that I haven't shared them with you yet. I started editing the videos. Then I realized how I miss working on portraits. So I created the third one and decided to add it to the same YouTube video to compare how my techniques and style have changed in these 2 years. While you are watching the video, I will tell you about the process and share some useful tips with you, along with some stories from my journey with self-portraits. So here we go. Whenever I watch myself painting, especially if it's an old video like this one, I notice more clearly what went well and what went wrong. And by wrong, I mean things I could have done differently to achieve the result in mind. In this portrait, I started with a sketch, then I traced the sketch with an ink pen, creating an outline for the illustration. You may notice that I don't always follow the exact sketch that I made originally. I follow the sketch as a guide, not as rules, based on what I see best while painting. When tracing the eyes, make sure you intentionally leave white space for the light reflection in the iris. Since I used ink after the sketch here, I could erase the pencil before moving on to the colors. I started using the lightest colors and going slightly into darker and darker tones. You don't have to worry much about coloring inside the lines. It's a preference, but personally, I don't mind when the watercolor escapes the lines and overlays with the color next to it. I feel like it creates an organic effect. And remember that we are organic beings. We are not computers or AI, and we certainly do not have to act like one. If it feels like my speed is intimidating, that's because the video is 7 times faster than the original speed. So do not worry, the process takes time, and mistakes do happen. Like here, for example, I accidentally add blue to the cheek. So I had to add water, absorb some of the paint with a tissue, and then add some more of the skin color to blend the colors. I really enjoy making these portraits, mixing some realism with geometry. The realism is mainly in the face details like the eyes and the lips. In the first 2 portraits, the geometric style is more exaggerated, and the hair braids especially. It extends to the face features in this one, while in the next one, the hair has sharp geometric shapes, while the face is more realistic and organic. Again, I started with a pencil sketch, but here I did not trace the outline. Instead, I started adding the main skin and hair colors. I wanted the hair to be wavy, following the emboss of the face, and then falling down straight once it is no longer resting on the face. The tones in the hair braid get darker as we get closer to the face to make it seem like the deeper layer of the hair braids falling over the face. You don't have to worry much about the pencil sketch showing in the end, for it will be mostly covered or blended with the coloring. And even if it still shows slightly, I personally like the rough effect it gives to the drawing. I rushed by adding the lashes this early in the process, for the lashes are a top layer. A better way would be to finish the skin and the eye and then add the lashes, just like in the makeup process. This way, you don't have to worry about ruining any details and painting over them. You can always use a tissue to absorb the extra water of the paper. This also helps the colors to blend by removing the excess of paint. unless you are looking for strong colors. Here I started finalizing the details with a small brush. The lashes are now hidden again with a new layer of paint, and I will have to retrace them later on. Adding patterns above the main colors with shadows and highlights to increase contrast by using our darkest and brightest tones for this portrait. The sketchbook that I am painting on is handmade from recycled paper. The paper is not exactly made for watercolor, so it can become a little wavy and wiggly when overflown with water. You can always press the sketchbook with some heavy books or under the bed once you are done, and the paper will be flat again. You might want to press it multiple times throughout the process, as I did in the next painting. In the eye, you want to make sure you add the shadow against the highlight, so if the light is coming from the right, there should be some shadow from the left. This will give it a nice realistic feel. The first time I did an autoportrait was a project in uni. In our first year, our sketching teacher, Mr. Maurice, may his soul rest in peace, asked us to draw ourselves at home facing a mirror. When I brought the sketch, he told me that I made my face look less beautiful than it actually is. Mr. Maurice was a very kind teacher. He used to go around in the class looking at our sketches and just nodding, never saying any negative comments. We used to ask him to tell us anything, but he just wanted us to practice. And because he rarely gave any comments, when he said this to me, I had to listen. And he did say it with a lot of compassion and kindness. It took me a while to see it and to realize that my image of myself was indeed not a confident one. I was 18 at the time, and I had just moved out of my parents' house to live in Beirut in dorms close to the university on my own. I used to pretend that the reason I never made a self-portrait before that assignment was because I did not want to engage in what seemed to be a narcissistic action. However, at that time, I used to draw a lot of portraits of faces that I found to be beautiful and/or interesting, but never my face. Which I later on came to realize that the real reason was that I do not appreciate the beauty of my own face, and that for some reason I am avoiding facing myself, literally and figuratively. With each portrait I made, I felt like I understood the person I am drawing a little more by noticing the smallest details in their face features, which can reveal a lot about our inner states. So why not understand myself a little more? The first autoportrait painting I did was 4 years ago in the Dragon's Dance. When I came to start the painting, I still found myself hesitant, wondering if painting myself will come up as self-centered egoism. But I had a stronger impulse this time to just go for it, without worrying about what anyone might think. To my surprise, this was and still is one of my most popular paintings. Also, many of my friends who know most of my work told me that this was their favorite. At first, I couldn't understand why, but then I realized that it's because it was honest. For me, it represents a higher self, one that is balanced, calm, present. And maybe it's a higher self that my community shares and strives for, which makes it relatable to many of you. turned out that drawing myself actually had the opposite effect of what I was expecting. It grounded me, not identifying with the face, but rather studying it, understanding it, with love and compassion and appreciation for the beauty of nature's work. Since then, I make an autoportrait every once in a while using different mediums to capture my image of myself at the time. And the more I befriend myself, the more beautiful these portraits get. The first portrait in this video is somehow an autoportrait. But it is a stylized autoportrait from when I had this haircut. The style is sharp geometry. It feels like it represents the part in me that loves order, grids, and math. The second portrait is inspired by the face of my beloved husband, while the style in the third painting is more rounded and symmetrical with a twist of Vulcan ears. And for the third one, my intention was not to make an autoportrait. However, I noticed that without meaning to, I tend to draw facial details similar to mine. I also noticed that this is common among artists. I've heard once that even Mona Lisa's face was somehow similar to the artist Leonardo da Vinci's face. The reason may be because it's the face that we see most and that we draw most, so it is the most imprinted in our head and hands. When I started coloring this last portrait, I first went on autopilot. Then I decided to experiment with the light. So I added warm yellow light coming from the upper left corner and dark blue and purple to the shadows from the opposite side. This was a fun twist to try. It added some sci-fi mood. It's been a while that I have been painting digitally. When I came back to organic painting, I find some things to be different. Some easier and some harder. For example, I found myself to be a bit hesitant before starting with the shadows. Because on the computer, you can always add as much layers as you want and then delete them later. While on paper, whatever you do, for the most of it, it cannot really be undone. Another side of it is the symmetry. When I draw digitally, the symmetry is automatic. So I only have to make half of the drawing and the computer will continue the other side. While you're drawing on paper, you have to be doing the symmetry manually, moving from side to side, constantly balancing both. And this can be a bit challenging. However, when it comes to portraits, it is more realistic, because faces are not really symmetrical. And when you draw a perfectly symmetrical face, it looks a bit uncanny. However, after I come back from digital drawing for a while to organic painting, I do find myself more confident, because I had the chance to try without worrying about destroying the paintings, which helps me to push further and see what I would do if I had infinite chances in changing my mind and changing the artwork and upgrading it more and more. So there are pros and cons for each techniques, and it's all a preference based on the outcome that you need. But I do believe that we should always come back to organic materials and real tools, to touch the paper and the paint, to have this full sensory experience that you cannot have with the screen, and to learn how to make decisions even if you cannot get back on those decisions. I mean, you can always start a new painting, but in the same painting, if you do something, you have to stick with it and continue from there. While working on this painting, at some point my friend was also painting next to me. And as I thought about another one of our teachers from our uni days, my friend says in a synchronistic moment, "Whenever I paint, I remember Miss Dima." I said, "No way, I was just thinking about her and about how she taught us this technique." Miss Dima is a special teacher who graciously shares her knowledge and experience with her students. She taught us many things, including painting techniques. However, what was so special about her is how she could see through each and every one of us. She had a strong intuition and a motherly care that makes you want to make her proud. I'm very grateful to have been one of her students, and to Mr. Maurice, and to many others of our inspiring teachers that might come up in other videos. The white pen that I am using for the highlights here is an ink pen, which does not dissolve easily in water. I used the brush with a bit of water to make the edges fade into the painting. For those of you who enjoy drawing and painting, I hope I gave you some useful tips for your process. And for those who are not interested in practicing the medium but are interested in having their own portrait or maybe gifting one, you can go now to my website, crystalsamiauniverse.net. You can find the links in the description, or go to the contact page, send me a message, and I shall create a very special portrait for you. It can be realistic, stylized, or with a twist. Like if you wish to merge the portrait with some fantasy elements like the last one. I would love to hear your thoughts about this video. Which painting did you like? Which thoughts do you resonate with? What is your perspective on self-portraits? And I hope the story inspires you to love yourself a little more. Thank you so much for watching. Stay beautiful. Till next time. From my universe to your space.